Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Monday edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe, joined by Mary Kay Cabot. This, of course, is a Hey Mary Kay edition of the podcast. These questions coming from our Football Insider subscribers, our text subscribers. If you want to get involved in that, go to cleveland.com/Browns. Click the blue banner at the top of the page to join in with the fun on Football Insider. Mary Kay, let's get right to it. The news, of course, of the weekend that had Browns fans sort of gnashing their teeth a little bit on social media, a little bit upset. The Cowboys made the move to get Brandon Cooks from the Texans. It didn't take much. It was a 5th rounder this year, a 6th rounder next year. So, of course, a lot of Browns fans were curious why the Browns didn't do that. So we'll start with Dave Barnes from Richmond, Virginia. Hey, Mary Kay, how do you feel about the Cowboys trading for Brandon Cooks, only having to give up a 5th and a 6th, and the Texans paying part of his salary? Seems like this would have been a perfect deal for the Browns. Couldn't they have offered 2/5?
Yeah, it really wasn't just about the draft pick compensation. It's also about the money that has to go with it. So you have to be able to make a deal from both sides. I mean, apparently, and maybe I'm sure they probably did try. I'm sure they tossed their hat into the ring. But, they probably, if they could, ideally in a perfect world, land a younger receiver like a Jerry Jeudy. I think they probably would rather do that and continue to work on something like that. But yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. People don't realize it. I mean, even when you talk about, with Amari Cooper, well, why didn't everybody go out and try to get Amari Cooper for a 5th round pick? Because then it's about the money that you have to work out too. Either you have to work it out with the club or you have to work it out with the agent or the player, whatever the case may be. But it's not just about the draft pick compensation. You have to have two parties willing to tango on the money as well.
Still, though, obviously I can understand Browns fans' disappointment in not getting a guy like Cooks and, a guy who's played with Deshaun Watson. I think he was probably near the top of the list on most Browns fans' targets. How badly, as you kind of looked into the receiver market and sort of what the Browns were interested in, how high do you think they were on the possibility of Cooks?
I don't know that they were that high on the possibility of Cooks. Once again, because they didn't necessarily want to have another high-priced receiver, because we know Amari Cooper is a high-priced receiver. So they didn't necessarily want to have two of those guys that were also getting up in years. And Brandon Cooks is 30 years old. So I think that had something to do with it. I don't know if they were clamoring to get that done, in part because of that issue. They didn't want to get themselves into another situation where they had an Odell Beckham Jr. and a Jarvis Landry, making a ton of money and really just not really wanting to do their cap that way.
Okay, so we had a bunch of receiver questions. So let's knock these all out, and then continue to talk about this position as we go. Hey, Mary Kay, this comes from Stacy in Columbus. Hey, Mary Kay, what are the chances the Browns acquire DeAndre Hopkins? Is it true he wants to play with Watson? And this kind of goes with the discussion we were just having. Can the Browns afford him?
Well, you know what? Once again, I think it's a situation where you're talking about a receiver who's going to cost a significant amount of money and one who's kind of getting up there in age. I think in a perfect world, they would rather try to have a younger receiver and not be spending all that money on an older wideout. So I don't know if they're clamoring for DeAndre Hopkins, but, once these receivers start to come off the board and fall away, things can change. So anything can happen. I mean, that's just how this all works. You try to get a guy, it doesn't work out, then you move on to the next guy. So I don't know if DeAndre Hopkins is super high on their list. I actually think they would probably rather have Odell Beckham Jr. ahead of DeAndre Hopkins.
Well, funny you should mention that name because we had a question about Odell Beckham Jr., so we're knocking all of these out. Hey, Mary Kay, given that OBJ may be the most talented available wide receiver, what is keeping the Browns from signing him? Is it the nature of his exodus or his price tag?
Not the nature of his exodus, because as I have been writing, they're basically over that. Everybody's over that. The Browns are viewing that as a situation that happened in large part because of Baker Mayfield and, just the disconnect between Odell and Baker. But, that is no longer, nobody cares about that anymore. Some of the parties that were involved back then are gone. A lot of the people that are still here, like a Myles Garrett, he would welcome Odell Beckham Jr. back. He would embrace him being back here. And I think that, some people in the front office felt that he had quit on the team, but I think those hard feelings have dissipated as well. I think, in the rearview mirror, you can see that, Baker Mayfield had a lot to do with the problems that went on with Odell Beckham Jr. I actually think if they could get the money right, and that's not going to be easy. We saw Odell tweeting over the weekend that whoever said I wanted $20 million a year, but 4 is not enough. And part of it is in how you structure the contract. I mean, actually, 4 in base salary might be enough for this year to get the job done, as long as you spread it out over a few years and you've got a signing bonus and you've got some different things going on. So we'll have to see what happens, but I wouldn't rule anything out at this point.